Welcome back to T Watts and TR on the YouTube and podcast homes for BamaOnline.com. I'm Travis Reier. He's Tim Watts. Tim, our guy Tex Tider, we're doing this live again, by the way. Our guy Tex Tider already in the comments giving us some justified grief about the 9-ish a.m. Central start time, But
We'd have been on
we're
time.
here.
That was my fault. Jordan Seaton has rocked us a little bit, and we've been scrambling ever since he had his announcement that he's got an announcement coming. So
The announcement of the announcement.
very interesting. Number one offensive tackle in the country, out of the blue announces, comes off a visit from Ohio State. I checked with a lot of sources. Nobody feels great. Nobody seems to know this was coming. So, and then even this morning, I've talked to a couple of people I do trust in the situation, who think maybe it won't even matter because he could commit and take other visits and we could still have drama. So
that's what I was going to ask you next. With the way this thing is gone, regardless of what happens here in the next couple of days, is it really over?
It doesn't sound like it. I mean, Alabama's been consistent in his recruitment, but there's so many other schools. We had a nugget yesterday on the round table. NIL could come into play. And we say that without judgment. I know some people get mad when we say it. I mean, that's the world we live in now. But a lot of factors in play.
Sounds like it. I'll tell you what, man, I'm a little haggard this morning, not fresh shaven or anything like that. Stayed up late watching my Jags losing overtime to a backup quarterback.
That was just
Jake Browning went Joe Burrow on my Jags late night.
You know who did not go Joe Burrow was the wide receivers that tried to throw passes.
Oh, man, I wanted Tyler Boyd to throw one more pass late in that game.
I mean, that double pass. I mean, I saw the Manning's reaction last night after the game. I was watching the game, but then I saw the Mannings, Eli and Peyton were talking about it, and it was hilarious. I mean, just threw it right to the linebacker, and terrible.
Right to Josh Allen, and the Jags still couldn't get home. And Trevor Lawrence gets hurt in the process.
It looked like an ankle sprain, right?
It looked like Tua's ankle against Georgia in the 2018 SEC championship game. So I'm thinking tightrope time for Trevor. Maybe you get him back for the playoffs if you make the playoffs now, because Jacksonville last night went from number one seed in the AFC to struggling to make the playoffs if Trevor's out. Because I just don't think my guy, CJ Beathard, is going to get him home. So maybe needing some help where Juice is concerned, but we got a lot to get into on the latest installment of T-Watts and TR. We'll get into some leftovers. We're big leftovers guys, whether it's Thanksgiving, whether it's football weekends. We'll continue to put a wrap on Alabama, Georgia, the college football playoff selection fallout. We talked about that on the immediate heels Sunday of Alabama's inclusion into this 4-team field. We'll talk some Alabama basketball as well, Tim. Crimson Tide coming off a 24-point win last night over Brian Hodgson in the Arkansas State Red Wolves at Coleman Coliseum. Big stretch coming up for Alabama hoops. Man, we've got a loaded mailbag once again too, Tim.
They get after it.
They do get after it, but
they're trying to stump us, I think.
Yeah, they love to do that. We appreciate
getting us to answer the questions we won't answer.
The more the absolute merrier, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
What about any residual couple days later thoughts on Alabama's 27-24 win over the Georgia Bulldogs?
I thought it was very close to as complete a game as you're going to get. I still, it's kind of been odd to me, the negative reaction. I've seen Georgia fans really negative about their team this year. I think Georgia's a good football team. I think in 9 out of 10 years, easily, they're still in the college football playoffs in this scenario. In fact, we saw it a couple of years ago. But I think the win by Alabama, I just think they did what they had to do, and there was clutch plays. And look, there's championship moments in every football game, win or lose. And Georgia cutting it to 3, hyped. They're in the end zone. They did their celebration dance. They're all ready to go. They never saw the ball again. They never saw the ball again. Alabama took it down the field. Jalen with a great run right away. I will say there's a little bit of a myth. Even my friends that they're the most reasonable were like, Bama dropped 5 interceptions. Look, a couple for sure probably should have been called, but 2 of those would have been the greatest catches in the history of football. I mean, one, he was running the opposite direction and dove back like the Matrix. So I thought Alabama played good. Guys stepped up. So many, from everything to that game. And I've watched it 3 times. Everything in that game just stood out to me. Burton scoring his touchdown and just calmly looking, putting the ball down and going to the sideline. Burton controlling himself. And we know that wasn't easy, right?
No.
We know that wasn't easy for Jermaine to just quietly walk away. Pass was, deflected. He defended. The guy was yelling at him. Burton runs to the sidelines, didn't say a word. Now, he said a lot after the game, but not even that bad. He's just saying he broke some hearts. And let's be real, that's just a good observation by Jermaine. But Milroe, the defense, the guys that stepped up, Terry, I mean, just so many guys in that game. I couldn't have been happier. I don't know. I love the 2020 team, right? I loved them. I thought they were coming back to college. They had character. They had leadership. Smitty, one of my all-time favorites. Najee, as unique as they come. Mac, a tremendous year. But I think this team's right there with them for teams that I really enjoyed watching, not only just on the field, but you see these guys off the field. They're all just the coolest guys. They're well-spoken. They got a lot of Alabama in them.
They do, and kind of felt like that would be the requirement for this team against Georgia. Georgia had kind of become maybe even more Alabama than Alabama had been the last couple of seasons, but I think we saw Jeff Hughes mention this in the comments just now. He thought the OL and DL dominated for Alabama in the game. I think for the most part that was the case, and that was Alabama being the more Alabama of the 2 teams. And I continue to go back to the end of halves, end of game scenarios that played out, Tim. The end of that second quarter where the Georgia field goal after the false start from the 45-yard attempt turns it into a 50-yard attempt, goes off that right upright. Alabama in some instances we've seen with Nick Saban maybe not look to be that aggressive on the heels of a play like that late in a half. But I think Georgia having the ball coming out to start the third quarter probably influenced the decision. Hey, we need to try to go right here and get some points. And talked about that 3rd and 21 completion of Mari Niblack that set up the 4th and 4. And I know some folks looked at the 4th and 4 and said, man, that was a little bit extra not taking the field goal there. Well, the field goal was going to be 55 yards. I've heard some people talk about eschewing the field goal attempt like it was 33 or something. No, it's going to be a 55-yard attempt. I know we're talking about Will Reier, but that's still getting on the outer fringes of his range. So aggressive there, going for the 4th and 4, Isaiah Bond's catch, and then to convert it in the end zone and take that 10-point lead. And as you talked about earlier, the fourth quarter, whenever Georgia started to make a move, Alabama on those 2 possessions to cap the game just had emphatic answers for it. Tommy Reese with some good play calling, Jalen doing what he can do with his legs. That was a textbook finish for the Alabama offense.
Yeah, the thing about Jalen is, he'll look, you're not sure how fast he is, and then he'll show you how fast he is. Like the play at LSU when he was, fake the pass out on the left flat and then cut it up. You saw that against Georgia on that last drive. He just tucked it and run, and dude I'm telling you, dude's like he's like Adrian Peterson to me when he's at full. I don't think he's always at full gallop because when you're running at that speed, at that size, it ain't hard to take a helmet on the thigh and it not leave a mark. You're actually playing a little bit of Frogger. You're playing like get the yards and dodge. I think the whole year trying to keep him safe, keep him protected because he did take some blows this year. But when he just said, I'm running all out, that's a bad man. But I thought the coaching was good. The adjustment, one of the things I've loved the most about this season is Nick Saban's been the most verbal at explaining stuff to us. I think he realizes how dumb we are, right? He's finally figured out like these stupid people, I got to explain to them what we did, why we did it, and how we did it. And to see him just sit there and talk, even one play, they got the little segment for football. He's talking about one play. It's one of the most amazing things you'll see. But yeah, I mean, the guys, the action before, after getting in, the reaction was just, fantastic. And we thought, I think even some Alabama people thought we were being homers when we picked that. But Alabama has always matched up against Georgia,
Yeah.
matched up really well. So there's never been a situation. We talked about this before. It's not surprising Georgia matches up against Alabama fairly well.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
I don't think there was a bad pick in that game. If you picked Georgia, I totally got it. I think if you picked Alabama, I understood that too because of what you just said. These teams are essentially mirror images of one another, and it could come down to just a
A
couple of
turnover.
sequences in the game. And really, if you want to boil it down to the most simplistic viewpoint, the turnover by Georgia, the one turnover in the game, it wasn't just a turnover, it was a turnover inside the red zone. So Alabama was able to convert some easy points there, 3 points, 3 point game. That's the narrow margin that these can come down to in terms of impactful plays and matchups with teams like this.
Anybody predicting a blowout, and believe me, every blowout prediction was that Georgia was going to blow Alabama out. That's just naive. I've never seen so many emotion. I know there's guys in this business, I guess in this business that have allegiances. Obviously, a guy like David Pollock's a Georgia guy. I don't mind those guys, but the ones pretending to be neutral that clearly aren't neutral, those are the ones that irritate me. I mean, just don't pretend. Just go jump on a website and work on it. Wear your hoodie wherever you want to go. We'll get you a hat. But a lot of hurt feelings. I mean, I think a lot of it's for show, but Alabama 1,000,000% deserved to be in that top 4. And that's not a test saying anything against Florida State. I get the Florida State anger. Absolutely. I mean, we would probably have a similar version out of it if Alabama wasn't in.
I think so. Even
Yeah,
at 13-1, I think you would have, because again, you go back to the 9-0 record in the SEC. That's just not easy to do. It's not something some of Nick Saban's best teams, best ever teams have done is go through conference play without a loss. So, what about this matchup now looking ahead? We talked about it a little bit on Sunday following the playoff reveal, but a Michigan team that, like Alabama, is comfortable playing at the line of scrimmage with those offensive and defensive lines. If you're a traditionalist, I think this is a matchup you're going to enjoy from a multitude of levels, whether it's the two winningest programs in college football history, whether it's the sort of retro style at times that you'll see from both these teams. This fits the leatherheads, I guess you can say, to a T.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old school guy. I like football. I like sports. I like to see a traditional Michigan uniform versus a traditional Alabama uniform. You got Jim Harbaugh, you got Nick Saban, you got the 1 seed. A lot of history there. I think there'll be a lot of respect in this game. But I think it's the matchup. I think it's a good matchup for Alabama because, like you said, I think the ones you struggle the most with when you're trying to figure out how to stop a Jaden Daniels, or you're trying to figure out how to stop a Josh Heupel, grab a gear and go offense. So you're trying to figure all that out. This is just basically we're going to line up man to man on both sides and play football and see who's wins. I think there'll be a lot more trickery and tomfoolery in that other game with Washington and Texas, because it's not like in that game you're going to be able to hold a lot back to get to that next game. You're going to kind of show what you've got in that game. So I think both matchups were really, really beneficial for Alabama.
Yeah, I think the field is set. You see some of the early lines from Vegas. Are you surprised, Tim? Michigan, a 1.5 point favorite over the Crimson Tide, at least early anyway.
Nah, I'm not. I mean, I don't know Vegas. I mean, the money moves around so much. I saw Bama and Georgia was up to 6 and closed really fast that morning to 4. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I imagine it's basically a pick'em game for most people, I think, right? I mean, I like Alabama's chances. I think Michigan would have preferred to play FSU, but I think they're confident. The one thing about that Michigan team is they've kind of had to build that whole us against the world mentality, because it is them against the world. Now, it's a self-inflicted wound. I mean, they caused this to happen, but they've had to rally around their coach and they've had to do all that stuff. So that team's going to have a good feeling of locker room, a good sense of self as well. So they're going to have some confidence going into the game, but and they'll have a lot to prove, right? They're going to have a lot to prove. And then you got Alabama, who plays with a certain looseness. There's a certain relaxed feeling when Alabama plays, even when they're down. You're wondering why they're so relaxed on the sideline.
Yeah, I think when you look at Michigan, fair or not, the question you're going to ask is explosiveness on offense. And can they produce enough of that in a game against a team like Alabama? Michigan this season, through 13 games, Tim, just 4 pass plays of 40 yards or more. And when you look at Alabama through 13 games, 17 pass plays of 40 yards or more. So Michigan, I think the perception is, boy, this is a team that runs for 250, and they don't. They run for about 160. They average about 4.2 yards per carry. And then again, when I start looking at explosiveness through the air, Michigan in that 10 to 20 yard range, pretty impressive. But once you get to 40 yards and beyond, which has been such a strength for this Alabama team, I think LSU, the only other SEC offense with more pass plays of 40 yards or more this season. That's one of those dividing lines, one of those separators, I guess you could say, when you start thinking about this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Penn State game where I can't remember, I might be exaggerating it in my head, but it was like 30, 32 times in a row they ran the ball, right? I'm not sure that McCarthy had a pass in the second half or a completed pass in the second half. So that's just a definition of bullying, right? You know, you just go out there but man to man, helmet to helmet. So, I mean, you look at their stats from game, their game leaders. When you look at that, there's not, like you said, there's not big pass days. I mean, the highest of the year was 280 against East Carolina, Purdue 335. I mean, McCarthy had 60 yards passing against Penn State, 148 against Ohio State, 147 against that very tricky Iowa team who had a good defense and a terrible offense. I can't quite get over that football team this year, though. But obviously, a team that wants to grind, you got to take away the run as much as you can, limit it, because they're going to shorten the clock. They don't want you to have the ball. You don't want to be giving up an 8-minute drive, a 17, 16-play drive against this team. You're going to have to, pressure them, win on the line of scrimmage. And it's Michigan. They're going to have linemen. If they have nothing else, they'll have offensive, defensive linemen.
They will. We talked about it Sunday, a pretty key injury for Michigan in that Ohio State game at the offensive guard position. So we'll see how that plays out. You mentioned that Penn State game. Penn State's so bad on offense. I think 3 points for Michigan, you'd almost feel like that would be enough. It ended up being a 24-15 game.
Dude,
Boy,
Saturday night,
offense.
Saturday night, I felt like I was at one of Dante's levels of hell. I was watching Iowa and Michigan offense, and then over here I was watching FSU and Louisville.
Oof.
And I'm like, what did I do in the past life to deserve this 3.5 hours of really bad offensive football? So, but there was a lot of good defense in those games.
Yeah, I had the double box going for those 2 games, and I shut that down pretty quickly.
Dude,
I don't think I need both these games up.
Man, I was like, shoot.
It was tough. But yeah, I mean, McCarthy with his legs, that, we talk about these quarterbacks in this game as we'll get more and more into it, obviously, as we get into the month. But legs, McCarthy can run it pretty well. We know Jalen can run it at pretty much an elite level. It's another area where, both these offenses will probably try to look to get a few things done. So, Tim, what about the transfer portal? Because we anticipated yesterday being Portal Monday. I'd say from the Alabama perspective, it was surprising in that more than anything, we learned Tyler Buckner was hitting the portal as a lacrosse player. Good for him.
I did not have on my bingo card that Monday I would spend digging through a lacrosse rabbit hole. Spent more time on Tyler Buckner than Jordan Seaton, for instance. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I looked up and Buckner was committed to Michigan in 8th grade. There's stories talking about he had dozens and dozens of offers as a middle schooler for lacrosse. I was blown away. Then I found YouTube highlights. So, so it was definitely legit, because I know everybody at first was sort of like the old Barry Bryant swimming scholarship, for the wide receiver to keep them just from going somewhere else. But no, he definitely was a lacrosse player and went at a very high level at one point. He's only 21 years old. So,
yeah, good for him, man.
I'll be honest. I think the portal, all the buildup, I have not got satisfaction from the buildup is what people were expecting. I mean, I have not seen. There's still a long way to go. I mean, there's been a lot of quarterbacks in there, which we kind of expected. Kyle McCord from Ohio State's a little surprising. Maybe Dylan Gabrielle from Oklahoma is a little surprising. But, I mean, for the most part, I mean, a lot of these guys are kind of who you expected to be in there. You'd heard it discussed, or, you know, a lot of guys are familiar names. We've seen a lot of these names before. And just not quite what, you know, I was expecting so far. Now, there's still a 20-something, 28, 29 days, whatever it is left. But it was a lot happening yesterday. It was a
What
busy
did you
Monday.
think Sunday night of the announcement for the 3 permanent team captains for Alabama in
Yeah, that's
Jalen
always
Milroe, Malachi Moore, and Dallas Turner? Did that sound about right to you?
it's tough. I mean, there's other guys I thought like Justin coming back could have got a spot at the D. I mean, it's just hard when you're picking 3. I don't have a problem with any of the 3. Let me be clear on that. Those are great players and gave a lot and played injured and bided their time. And, you know, all 3 of them are kind of a different story. You know, Malachi started, was signed almost. Nobody even really talked about Malachi as a freshman. Had a huge freshman year, banged up, came back. It's been banged up this year, just a, you know, a warrior. Heart and a lot of partly the heart and soul of that team. Dallas has been a, you know, standout from day one. And then Jalen waiting his turn, going through some adversities here. So I don't have a problem. But there's guys like Justin, you know, a guy that battled back from a neck injury, was a big impact. I mean, Alabama's defensive linemen are never going to put up Reggie White, Aaron Rodgers numbers, but they definitely, you know, were huge on the defensive line this year. But I mean, you can't fault those 3 guys. I mean, they helped carry the team. They were leaders. You see them emotionally on and off the field.
Yeah, I thought Deontay might be up there too, especially when you consider the number of games that he was a game captain for. I know that doesn't play into the vote, but yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of those 3 veteran type
Could it
guys.
be maybe they think Lawson's coming back?
I would think
Because,
he's coming back.
you know, Dallas is,
He
you know,
needs to come back.
I'd be shocked if Dallas came back, but
No,
Malachi's,
not Dallas, but Deontay.
yeah, that's what I was saying. I don't know if that factored in, and I'm just a dude. I'm starting a conspiracy myself now. It's going to
My
be a
guy, I
long,
thought my guy Will Reichard should have gotten
yeah,
consideration. I know he's a kicker, but you're talking about the NCAA
all,
all-time leader in score,
yeah,
but that's
yeah.
that's kind of a thing for kickers that they have to sort of overcome. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times you just wonder if it's going to be 3 guys, is it going to be 4? And it was 3. And what about the Heisman finalists? I wanted to ask you about that too, where Jalen was concerned. See where 4 guys are going to make the trip to New York City. I don't think you can really argue with the 3 or 4 that are going between Bo Nix, Michael Penix, of course, Jaden Daniels, who in my opinion should win it pretty easily, and then
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr. You know, I was asked about it earlier today. I said if there was a second half Heisman, then I would stand on the table for Jalen Milroe for sure. Because if it was broken down to just the last 6 or 7 games of a season, I would think he would be a finalist.
Yeah, I was surprised Harrison got in there just because he's a wide receiver. Not that, I mean, certainly a fantastic football player, going to be a top 2 or 3 pick in the draft, I'm sure. I'm going to go very high for a wide receiver. I didn't really expect him because it's such a quarterback. I actually thought if they took 4, it would be Jalen Milroe. But I mean, they do it by the votes, right?
Yes, those are your
So,
top 4 vote getters in some order.
yeah,
It'll be interesting because they reveal like the top 10 once it's over. And it'll be interesting to see where Jalen falls in that. Maybe he's 5th. I would think he's got to be in that 5 through 7 range, I would think, if he's not a top 4 guy.
yeah. I mean, I think somebody's going to ask this, and somebody on the round table did ask this, but he's definitely going to be a top 3 Heisman
Oh, yeah.
contender next year, I think, right?
I would be
Quinn
surprised.
Ewers, if he comes back, will probably be up there.
I think
Jalen,
Jalen will be ahead of Quinn even. Yeah, but those would be a couple of them for sure that you would
mhm.
think when you just start talking about quarterbacks that are coming back for next year. Hey, Tim, what about hoops? Alabama men's basketball, as we've talked about here for the last week or so, couple of weeks. Big stretch coming up. You knew this was on the horizon even after the loss to Clemson. Get a little bit of a breather at home last night with Arkansas State coming over from Jonesboro. But it gets real with the 7'4", 285-pound post waiting on you in Toronto on Saturday.
Yeah, last night was a fun game. I mean, you saw little smidgens. I mean, this team still, Pringle's suspended. I think there's a chance he's back for Purdue if he's doing the things right.
Nate said he would
Very,
be. Yeah.
yeah, very well balanced team. I mean, you got 4 or 5 guys in double digits. You got a few on the verge. Not a lot of shots for most of these guys. Sears led with 11. Estrada had 12. So good to see Brian Hodgson's back, who did a tremendous job recruiting for Alabama. And he looked good on that sideline. It was different seeing him because at Alabama, he was like the bouncer, right? He was
The
the guy that was
doorman.
always
Yeah.
holding his team back, and holding his team back and keeping them. So him being in charge was showing a little bit more less emotions, being more of a coach was good to see. But good game, easy, got outran, got some shots up, got some guys some playing time. But yeah, it's about to get brutal. I mean, it's about to get brutal. It's going to be brutal regardless, but the team struggled so far this year, especially in the paint. But Purdue, Creighton, Arizona, again, you're in the Elite Eight. You're in the Elite Eight. You're playing 3 top 10 teams and basically playing a 1 and 2 and 4 seed to
Yeah.
some to some regard. So, but I'm excited. I'm going to see what this team does. Have recruited well. They did a good job, but I think this is going to be Nate Oates' most challenging team the last couple of years. And also, you kind of spoiled from last year, right? The run out of the gate, the number 1 seed, the clutchness, the way that team rallied around each other despite the off-field stuff, the court stuff. So kind of spoiled from that group.
Make 13 threes last night in that win. That's a nice number always. 42% from beyond the arc, and then make 20 of 24 from the free throw line. A little bit troublesome, I'd say, to see Grant Nelson leave the floor or leave the game like he did. But Nate in the post game sounds like he expects Grant Nelson to be able to go. And as we said, Zach Edey coming up for Purdue on Saturday. That's a game where, if he gets his 25 and 11, which is what he's averaging right now, you can probably survive that. What you can't survive is a couple other guys around him going for their numbers or maybe even above their numbers, because you don't really have an answer for that guy. But you should be able to match up at the other spots.
Yeah, you're just going to have to make your shots and then defend the perimeter. I mean, they've been the thing about Purdue that might make them even more dangerous and tough is they've been in several challenges already. I mean, they had a tough game with Tennessee, they had a tough game with Gonzaga, Marquette, and they just lost in overtime or double overtime at Northwestern. So they're battle tested. But yeah, Edey's going to get his. I mean, it's almost like the same thing we said about Brock Bowers to some degree. You're not going to really stop him. Alabama did a good job against Brock Bowers, but they're not really going to stop Edey. So you're going to have to defend that perimeter because you don't need a guard, getting 27, and small, somebody else chipping another 18, or you're going to be in big trouble. So make your shots, defend the perimeter. I'm probably making it sound easier than it is, but that's what my suggestion would be.
Yeah, that I think would absolutely work. And it's a Purdue team, as you said, battle tested. They were in that Maui Classic, Maui Invitational out
That's
on
a heck of a
Oahu, where we talk
yeah.
about Elite Eight type of runs. They were essentially in that for 3 straight days.
And those
And
were great games
oh,
too.
you had
Those were
Kansas out
great.
there. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
those were great games.
Kansas, Tennessee. That was a heck of a field out in Honolulu. What about your guy Herb Jones? Shifting gears a little
Dude,
bit, keeping with
Herb.
Alabama basketball, but you're a Pels fan, as we know, and Herb getting it done, man.
I'm telling you, this guy, I said in the preseason, I said, he's shot. He sure looks comfortable with his shot, right? He looks really comfortable. You can just see how much work he's did. It's not surprising knowing he did a ton of work in the offseason on that shot. We know what a good defender he is. I mean, we were in Minnesota, me and the family, and he was defended Carl Anthony Towns the whole game. I mean, you're talking about a monster center who also can shoot the three. He defended him the whole game, but I mean, dude's got his shot. Pelicans won a big one last night. Herb's just fun to watch, and that team's fun to watch. I mean, I don't care who you like. You got young guys, you got Bi, you got Zion, and all those. So you got a lot of stars. You got 3 max guys on this team, right? You got CJ McCollum, you got Zion, and you got Bi. So it's not. And on the bench, you got role players. You got Trey Murphy, you got Jose Alvarado. This team's got talent. So Herb has went from almost a role player to he's one of the stars. I mean, the thing that I love about Herb, I think, is what other people say. Like after the game, they're asking Luka about Herb, and he is saying He's a great player. He's kind of quiet. You see a little bit of emotions. A fist pump from Herb. That's basically a Jermaine Burton outburst. That's about as wild as Herb gets. But just been fun to watch him. I see a lot of him because I watch him every night. But seeing him play the way he is, he had a crazy tip in
How
last
about
night.
that next deal for him, man?
They just got him for 4 for 54, I think.
Yeah,
So that's a heck of a deal. But
that's
that guy
value.
for Herb though, that's a max contract because he's wearing his Alabama.
That's a lot of
practice.
money. That's a lot of money in Hale County.
He's wearing his Alabama practice shoes at the Pelicans facility this morning. So but they got him. He'll be close to 30 on his next deal. The NBA don't care about age. He's playing like this, he'll be in the ballpark of a max player. I don't know if he's ever going to. Some of them make 47, 50 million, which is bananas to me, but he'll be in a much higher
20 million plus.
Wait till he sees his taxes on this next contract.
And
He is
20
going to be
million
livid.
plus per. Yeah. The taxes.
Yeah, he's going to be like, what is this?
Yeah.
A whole new brag. But yeah, he's a fun player.
Speaking of pro sports and Alabama guys, you catch sounds like you caught Tua maybe last night on the Manning cast playing the guitar and talking to Peyton and Eli.
Yeah, he's a character, isn't he? It's funny for us because we knew who Tua was. We covered him in recruiting. We knew the Hawaiian thing and the way he talked and the hang loose and the Hawaii vibes. We had all of that on our
message board. Yeah.
Yeah, we had all that on the map. We covered him. But when he hit that, 2nd and 26, the whole world found out he could play the ukulele. The whole world found out what a character he was and how original he was. And of course, the family lived in Alabaster. I knew them and great people and fun, just the same way, just that easy vibe about him. But yeah, he's a character. He's got a future. And whatever he chooses to do, I imagine he'll be standing on the stage instead of sitting in the crowd.
So if we include Jalen Hurts in this discussion that I'm about to throw at you, and I'm including him in there.
Definitely.
Who is Alabama's best NFL player right now?
Dang, man, I don't. Quinnen? Impactful, not sexy, but dude, he's a mountain when he's down there.
He's a dude. What about Jalen Waddle? I know he's a wide receiver, but
no, that don't Smitty's another one low key that he clears up a lot of space for him. If I was I tell you, I guess I'd have to put him in the categories. I know the hardest playing one is still Josh Jacobs.
Yeah,
when he runs, he runs mad. He's like somebody. He sees a linebacker, it's like he took his wallet. He still runs hard, plays hard. Jalen would be up there. Smitty would be up
there.
Jeff
Hughes says C.J. Mosley here in the comments. C.J. still got some run in him for sure.
Yeah, he's rounded the crest, but he's definitely a good football player. That Jets defense, another, they're the.
You talk about a wasted year with the Rodgers injury. Oof. Not being able to do what you want to do with that team and specifically that defense, right?
Surtain, are we going to include him in there?
Yeah, Patrick Surtain would be in there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Some of the guys, you want to name. When you asked me that, I went straight to my old Julio, Derrick Henry, and all those guys. And Derrick's still a mess. You know what I mean? He's still a handful. Hey, Jonathan Allen is a guy. He's a handful on that defensive line. So it's a good question. I don't really know if I know the answer right now.
Charlie Potter's got that weekly Tide in the NFL update for us there at BamaOnline.com. I'll tell you a guy who's probably not that far away, even though he's just a rookie, and that's Will Anderson, man.
Yeah, Will's a mess.
You talk about value where the Texans got their 2 cornerstone pieces in this last draft. Oof.
Yeah, they did really well. D'Amico's a good coach. I tell you, doesn't look like it, and it doesn't seem like it. But Bryce Young is having a good year as far as he's throwing the ball well. They're never open and they can't catch. That's part of the problem.
Just ask 10 people who say they know the NFL who he's throwing the ball to, though.
He's accurate. That's terrible. The thing about it. He is accurate. He is putting the ball where it needs to be. It's not a lot of, like you said, and the worst. They would have a top 2 pick, right? They would have. Can you imagine if Bryce had Marvin Harrison, because that's where he's projected in that top 3 to maybe the Bears, and the Bears have their pick. So you hook up Marvin, and we've seen sometimes it only takes a guy. I mean, Randy Moss and Dante Culpepper, we've seen those duos where you can put guys around him, but they're obviously going to get. I mean, I felt bad that they fired Frank Wright. I mean, what did you expect? What
Well,
did y'all
the
expect?
ownership situation is not good,
11
obviously.
games, and you fire this guy, knowing the situation. They also threw in DJ Moore in a trade. Hey, take this guy.
Exactly. So
take
you traded
take
away
wide
the only
receiver
real
one.
option he had to throw to get him.
Yeah, it's been a mess. I was surprised they fired the coach 11 games in. I don't know if there's turmoil, but yeah, Will, you watch the Texans. It's hard not to root for them. I mean, I think we're all, to me, if you're an Alabama fan, you got to love D'Amico Ryan's very few offers. Best for Alabama, All-American, was on that team that shut down Mike Leach in a bowl game, and the great Mike Leach, when nobody was holding him under double digits. And then, of course, the fast rise to the NFL. If you remember 2 years ago, I said he could end up being a head coach at Alabama, and he was an assistant coach, but everybody in the NFL talked about him that way. And I'm not saying he would. I'm saying he could be the caliber, but I don't know if any coaches are really going to want to leave the NFL for college football right now.
Our guy Tex Tider, he's on the same wavelength with me. I was going to put in here that I don't know exactly who the best Alabama player in the NFL is right now, former Alabama player, but I know the one with the best job. That's A.J. McCarron. His job last night in that overtime game as the backup to Jake Browning was to go out and call the coin flip before the start of overtime. That's the job to have, man. That's the gig, to call the
Yeah,
coin flip and
yeah,
not have to worry about it the rest of the night. Yeah,
yeah,
AJ's in a good spot once again. Hey, Tim, you ready to get into the mailbag?
yeah.
Ready or not?
What we got?
Let's
I am
do it.
ready.
Let's start with Bama Man for JC. Um, he wants predictions on Bama players winning trophies Thursday night. He thinks Reichard wins the Grossa and Kool-Aid wins the Thorpe. Maybe Dallas or Jalen Milroe pick up some hardware. It's probably not going to be popular, but I think it might be tough for Alabama representation in a lot of those awards. I think Will, in the first 8 or 9 games of the season, was a slam dunk. He had some misses down the stretch. I think he was 3 of 6 or so down the stretch. Kool-Aid with the Thorpe. Uh, you know, it's great to see Alabama involved in a lot of these, Tim, but I'm not. I don't know if I'm overly confident if it's going to be a sweep of a lot of these awards.
No, I agree. I haven't looked very deep into it, but I think there'll be bigger names. I mean, I think there could be even a little bit of blowback for Alabama getting in the playoffs, but I don't think it's clear cut like, in past years. Of course, it's the Thorpe. I mean, they could choose somebody we're not totally, totally unexpected. We've seen it before, but I don't really know. I think it's just good they're represented. They get to go, and Nick Saban's probably going to be there and be seen, I'm assuming. So all that stuff's going to come into play, but I don't feel super confident that, like you said, that they're going to win, the majority of those.
Yeah, it's tough a lot of times to sort of predict those type of things based on how the voting is conducted, and they're all seemingly different. I'll tell you, there's one that I'm not happy about already when it comes to Alabama players, and that's Terry and Arnold with the AP, I guess, all SEC team being second team.
That's kind
Uh,
of, yeah,
that's a first team dude, man. And
yeah.
it's not to say Kool-Aid wasn't deserving as well, but boy, when you had the kind of year Terry and Arnold had, that's a first team all SEC corner or defensive back if I've ever seen one. Crimson Lawyer checking in here, Tim. He wants you to answer this one. How much more challenging is it to get good recruiting info now that NIL has taken over, and what makes it more challenging if that is the case?
I'm in the minority. Well, I don't know if I'm in the minority. I don't think the NIL is taking over. Everybody can't name their price. I think that's the myth. Everybody isn't just about the NIL. I mean, Alabama, they have a plan. We've said this, that we're not privy to the plan. He doesn't tell us nobody tells us the exact way they're going to do it. We just know they try to keep it level across the board. And then the player make their own money on their own name, image, and likeness, which is what this is supposed to be about. We still get good information. We haven't really, there can always be some. The thing that's hardest is probably the late the late changes. If somebody comes in with an offer and they can change it late, but for the most part, it's been fairly consistent. In fact, a lot of these people are pretty honest with us that, if you're covering Alabama or certain schools that are only going to, that have parameters, I keep saying Georgia and Ohio State probably are in that same boat. You're going to know when they say he's going to the highest bidder. If it's going to straight NIL, you're going to know you're probably out of it. And I think Alabama's okay with that. I think that, again, you can't really, you don't really want people there just because you bought them. I think that's one thing. Alabama's trying to keep everybody happy, not one guy, not a class happy, but the whole 85 to 100 football players there. So, but I still feel like we get good information. I mean, we knew Jordan Seaton, the NIL is going to play a factor, and it's going to play a factor for some, but it's not, I can't say this enough, it's not the end all be all. You don't always have to be the highest on the NIL to get a player, especially for the more successful programs.
Yeah, it's just becoming another aspect of all this that we're learning more about, really, right? As we kind of
I mean,
move
let's be
along.
real. We're in the SEC. It's always been fairly dirty, right? We've always
Well,
had the stuff. So the NIL is just now a contract written with a direct deposit. I mean, that same thing can happen with an Adidas bag, blue chip style on the front porch with a tractor. So it
right.
wasn't like this, where this is a total novel concept. I covered basketball, you know what I mean? AAU basketball. So this is not, hey, they're now allowed to give guys extra stuff. No, this is just legally able to do it.
Goes to Bryant here in the roundtable mailbag. Ask, who are Michigan's best players, talent wise? Who would you compare Michigan to in the SEC? Well, we talked about Blake Corum, the running back. We talked about JJ McCarthy at the quarterback position. You've got 3 receivers for Michigan with 40 or more receptions. Roman Wilson, the wide receiver, Cornelius Johnson, a wide receiver. Both of those guys north of 40 catches. And then the tight end, Colston Loveland, with 40 grabs for 572 yards and 4 touchdowns. Wilson, though, has 11 of Michigan's 21 receiving touchdowns. So he's obviously a guy you're going to mark here in preparation. So just offensively, those are some guys that we know about. Tim, I seem to see Michigan in that top 10 range on an annual basis when it comes to recruiting. Is that a fair assessment? And with that, if that is the case, maybe not to the level of Georgia and Alabama as far as recruiting acumen, but certainly in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I would say that no. When I think of recruiting, I don't necessarily think of Michigan. I think more of Ohio State from that area.
Right.
I do think Michigan gets good players. They get good players. Obviously, top 10. I don't think they recruit at the same level that the other schools do. When you're looking at just recruiting, when you're looking at player rankings and all that kind of stuff, I'm pulling up their ranking for this year's class. But I mean, right now, if you look there, now it's a different year for them. Granted, they're 18th in the country, no 5 stars, 9 4 stars. But you look in that top 5, you're seeing Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, the schools you expect to see. But I think they recruit well for what they knew because, they're recruiting for their system too. And I think Jim Harbaugh probably drafted like that when he was in the NFL. They had a number 9 team last year. So I think they're probably right outside of that. Recruiting, Jimmy and Joe's versus X and O's, which isn't surprising. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is going to be a guy that trusts his X and O's, right? He's gonna trust them.
He is. And you're right. Stylistically, Michigan's a little different by today's standards, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They're kind of in that same boat with Georgia and Alabama in that they probably can't find enough tight ends with the way offense is played these days and the way they like to do it. Bama bullies on the roundtable thread for the mailbag here. Do you see Ryan Williams starting for Bama his freshman year at receiver and punt returner, or just receiver? And Bama Bully's having a little fun with that one. He's a little
He
bit
is.
tongue in cheek there. And he also asks, how mad are the Auburn fans going to be when they find out his announcement has nothing to do with them and that he will now be at Alabama next year? A lot in that one, Tim.
He went deep. As far as where Ryan projects in college, whether it be this year or next year, I mean, I definitely see a guy that you want the ball in his hands, and we've seen what Caleb can do. Now, Caleb looks pretty comfortable at punt return, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he
no,
looks,
Caleb's
yeah,
just fine at punt return. So
yeah. So maybe Ryan gets some of those. Maybe he's the backup guy. But the thing is, he's super explosive. The one thing that affects him, if he reclassifies, is he's not going to be a mid-year guy. So when you look at next year, wherever he goes, and it's not always the case. Malachi Moore wasn't a mid-season guy, and he certainly grabbed the reins and the opportunity. But a guy like Ryan, it's just going to be hard to keep off the football field. You know, he's a high IQ guy, but he is going to be, if he's in the 2024 class, he is going to be a year younger. We saw that with Jalen Hurts. Of course, Jalen was like the Texas version of Arnold Schwarzenegger in a weight room. So it's a little bit different there. He was a power lifter. Ryan's a thin guy, but yeah, he's a talent. He'll be hard to keep him off the field.
our guy Tuscaloosa checking in here in the roundtable mailbag. He asked, "Who was an unsung hero for Alabama in the SEC championship game?" I got a couple in mind. What about you, Tim?
You start. Let me think.
Well, I start with Trey Amos coming off the bench after Kool-Aid went out pretty early in the third quarter there with an injury, and
Yeah.
Georgia wasted no time going right at Trey Amos, ran Brock Bowers at him. Amos maintained leverage, made a nice pass breakup in the end zone, had the near interception in the fourth quarter there, ran the route for the Georgia receiver over on the Alabama sideline. I start with Trey Amos, but probably could go back to some guys on the line of scrimmage too. Alabama's
Yeah.
offensive line playing at a high level. We talk so much about Jaden Roberts on this show that it's probably beyond the level of unsung at this point. But I would start with Trey Amos. Christian Story had a big play in the red zone too with a pass breakup.
Oh yeah, he did. Could have had a pick. I don't know if this is an unsung, but I really loved what Roy Dell did.
Yeah.
I don't think we've talked enough about that. Was tough sledding. I mean, he was running hard, got a touchdown, only averaged 4 yards a carry. And I think people get caught up in that yards per carry because he was running hard, he was playing hard, and that was big. Losing Jace is that bowling ball, that big guy that was going to pound inside. And I'm on the full track of Jace gets his job back when he's healthy because I loved what Jace did this year. I thought, and I love this combo with all these running backs, anyways. But Roy Dell was a guy to me that had to step up. Not that I thought Jam Miller couldn't step up because he could have, but I trust Roy Dell to do what he did, and he had some several carries and some tough yards.
Yeah, I felt good about Roydell in tough yard situations because we had seen him do it this season.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still no doubt. You're absolutely on it. I think with Roydell, he was very good, as was Jam. So
Yeah,
it wasn't going to be a game of explosive runs. I didn't think for either team from the running back position. So hard yards, short yardage, ball security, those things, pass protection. That's where backs were going to need to step up the most. Tuscaloosa also here in the mailbag. Who allowed this narrative, he asked, of FSU being the most deserving team? Media types from all over the country, including locally, have taken that and run with it.
I just think people are sick of the SEC, sick of Alabama, especially sick of Georgia. I don't think Georgia got any love. I thought Georgia should have been fifth based on Bama being fourth. I don't know how Georgia was sixth. I don't know how you go from 1 to 6. I think you should have went 1 to 5th, and then kind of felt like dominoes. Texas at 3 beat Alabama, who's 4. Bama at 4 beat Georgia's at 5, who lost to 4. If FSU's out, they're out. I think the committee could have did themselves a lot of favors during this time. One, they could have dropped FSU when they knew they had lost Jordan Travis. No, let's just leave him up there. Everything's good. That backup's just as good. Jordan Travis was a hell of a football player. He was a tremendous football player for FSU. It'd be the same as losing Jalen Milroe. It was a heart of that offense. But yeah, the narrative started. I think they just want to see different teams. They don't care. A lot of the media, they don't care if it's a good game. They're like, TCU's in, and then they're, calling out the
And they
National Guard.
complain when Georgia dropped 60 on them in the title
Yeah,
game, though.
we're
Man, what
calling
a
out the
bad
National
title game.
Guard.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
we're calling out the
no
National
crap.
Guard to get Kirby off of them,
Yeah.
It's all fun and games with the underdogs. They're underdog most times. So
Everybody loves Cinderella until the
yeah,
clock
and I think
strikes.
that was it. And I think
Yeah.
they were just bullied. I think they were mad. They felt the SEC was bullying them. That's what I think. They're just the SEC. Yeah, it had nothing to do with beating #1 Georgia and stopping that long streak. Yeah, that didn't factor in. So I think they just got bullied and outraged with that. Because Alabama was deserving. That's not to say again Florida State wasn't deserving, especially with Jordan Travis. I would not want to have been on any committee in that situation. But yeah, I think that's the narrative. Plus, it gives them something to talk about,
Yeah,
something to gripe about on Monday.
absolutely. Tuscaloosa also, who should we be pulling for in the Washington Texas game as it relates to the best possible matchup for Alabama if we beat Michigan? Man, when I haven't watched, obviously I watched more of Texas just because Texas was on
Yeah.
Alabama's schedule. But what I've seen of Washington, those teams to me are kind of similar in some ways. I would say Washington maybe a little more quarterback dependent in Penix than Texas is. But I think it's kind of splitting hairs in a lot of ways for me anyway. I don't know about you, Tim.
Yeah, I think they're pretty similar. I mean, the thing with, I mean, you kind of just got to pick your poison. I think both of them are matchups that you feel okay about. You're familiar with Texas. They've lost their #1 running back. Sark's a good game player caller, especially when you have to watch his first 20 plays. He's as good as anybody in the business on his script or however many plays his script is. So they're a formidable opponent. You got the revenge factor. You got all that stuff going on, the familiarity between the programs. And Washington's a tricky team, and I said that all year because they weren't great in a lot of games. You felt they should have been great. They were closer than expected, but they matched up with Oregon as well as anybody could, basically, because they took away the run right out of the gate. Their run defense is really good. They got a pretty good cornerback. They got, I think his name's Muhammad, lockdown corner out there. They get some good pressure. So they're a problem. Now the offense, Phoenix is a little wild at times, but boy, he can sling it. He'll go vertical. He'll stretch the field, and they got some playmakers. So you're kind of looking at, do you want to face a little bit more of a defensive-minded unit in Washington or a little bit more offensive-minded unit in Texas? And I feel like both, like Travis said, both are just pick your poison. I think they're pretty much the same matchup difficulties.
I think they're both pretty Pac-12ish, which makes sense given Sark's sort of football
Yeah.
DNA from out west and those kind of things. I think it's kind of an here's why you should be pulling for Washington though, because the championship game is in Houston. So if
Yeah, that's a
Texas
good.
wins, if Texas wins and plays the national championship game in Houston, if you want to go to the game, especially as an Alabama fan, you'd like those ticket prices too
Oh, you're not. Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
down enough. So a couple of different things. You would think a big Texas support group there in Houston, if it comes down to it, Tuscaloosa, and that also kind of plays into the factor or tickets might be concerned as well. Major Wood 482 here in the roundtable mailbag says, Tim, hopefully by the time you guys do the show, you've heard some rumblings on some portal guys. You haven't really given much info, but I have a feeling Bone hinted on some visitors this weekend he wasn't going to mention. Is he talking portal visitors, Tim?
I think the portal, and I know this is not a popular answer, but the portal was more exciting for everybody who's not in the playoffs. I mean, I haven't really heard much from Michigan. Have you? Maybe I'm missing it, but I haven't heard Michigan, haven't heard Texas, I haven't heard Bam, and I haven't heard Washington. I just think it's too early. I mean, the portal, we discussed this on the recruiting show yesterday. It takes a minute to get that right. I mean, you got to make sure the grades are right. You got to do background checks. You didn't spend a year, 2, 3 years with these guys. You don't know them. You might have recruited them, but it's a year, 2, 3, 4 years removed from the last time you got to know them in the recruiting process. So that's all got to factor in. The NIL's got to be factored in. Who's leaving for your team? You still got a roster to manage. You can still only be at a certain number. So, but Bama's done. The one thing I'll say is Bama's done really well in the portal. They seem to know what they want. They need to see what they go after. Most of those guys impact them there. So I think with the portal, you're just going to have to preach a little bit more patience. I'm not aware of Andrew mentioning any portal guys visiting this week. I mean, the portal just opened up yesterday. The one thing we do is Bama. The one thing is, like, most programs might like a kid, but they're not going to scream, "We like a kid." First of all, second of all, they're going to do that background check, and then that thing starts getting a little more ramped up.
Major Wood 482 also. TR, do you think Texas is our biggest threat in the playoffs? I think Texas handles UW. Too much speed on offense, and their front seven isn't talked about enough. I think they have an elite front seven. Yeah, they have a Texas has a very talented front seven. And I think Washington a little bit undervalued from that perspective. I do think of the two teams in that matchup, Texas is more Alabama like in that it can beat you a couple of different ways. So I like Texas in the matchup, I guess, with Washington, which means I do think Texas uh, beyond the Michigan game. As far as Texas and Michigan together, I think Michigan is going to be an easier prep and an easier matchup for Alabama. That doesn't mean Alabama will win. I just don't think you have to check as many boxes in a matchup with Michigan as you do, let's say, Texas. Jam Bama checking in here, our pal.
Jim.
He says, can we please talk about the linebacker play, DL play, and OL play? Those positions and coaches were left for dead and gone, in the words of Nick Saban, to
He's being
start
a
the
little.
season. He wants
He's
some
being.
love for the
He's
front
being a little
seven and the
dramatic.
OL.
Yeah, he's being a little dramatic. But I think the key though was like, you threw Proctor out there and let him learn on the job, which isn't easy. I mean, we talked about this, but trial by fire. I mean, you threw him out there. Once he got a little bit settled, I think the whole line, Ferguson. I mean, that's your guy. I know how much you love Ferguson, and he does. I mean, he is. Nothing. The end of the game where he was standing there high fiving everybody. His energy's through the roof. Just a tremendous player, very popular. So the line's kind of settled down. Lawson, when he's healthy, I mean, it's hard for me to find a better inside backer than him in the country. And I think Robert Balla did a good job there. I think that T-Rob being a former defensive coordinator helped. Kevin Steele certainly has linebacker experience. All that helped and went into well. But I thought they played well.
Yep, no doubt. Just got better and better as the season moved along. And the DL with Tim Keenan, even the third and goal play before Georgia eventually scored on fourth and goal, that was a big play by Keenan because it forced Georgia to use a timeout right there with just a little less than 3 minutes left, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
that was big at that point in the
They
game.
did really well on short yardage. I know they scored on 4th and 1, but Bama on short yardage plays on defense, they were really good this year. They had a really good year defensively.
You're right. And a couple of third and shorts where Georgia tried to run that little toss into the boundary
Mm-hmm.
and got some good force from the corners like Terry and Arnold and some of the edge guys where they were able to stuff
What down? I don't
those.
remember what down it was, but they tried to get Bowers. It was a 6-yard loss. Was that 3rd down? I can't remember when Malachi just read it,
came
knew it,
across and they tried to dump it to him in the flat like they
and he
did
just
earlier, and
yeah.
Malachi blew that up.
No,
Yeah.
Malachi knew that play. If you watch that play, excuse me, he knew what was coming instantly. He was all over that play. So yeah, several good plays like that.
Todd Steele checking in here in the mailbag, and one of his questions that we'll get to. Now that he's been fired, do you think Connor Stallions would sell Michigan secrets to the highest bidder? Would Connor Stallions, after gathering all that intel that he did, unbeknownst, Tim, to any of the higher ups, apparently, at the University of Michigan, maybe he's got some Michigan secrets he might sell?
I don't know if there's Michigan secrets offensively. I think they're pretty
Pretty much right in front of you, isn't it?
I think Jim Harbaugh hands you the playbook and say, "Stop us on that."
Stop all 6 of these. Yeah.
Yeah, Connor guy. He's been a little mini celebrity. I saw our Missouri coach, who does not shy away from controversy. Eli, he did you see his little thing on Sports Center?
Yes, he had some
Where
fun. He
he
had some
said
fun with Michigan
he's like,
playing
hold
Ohio
on, guys, I
State.
gotta go. Connor Stallions on the phone. He's gonna give you some scouting information. So that guy, he's a fun coach. Missouri, they're lucky to have him. Good football team, but yeah, I don't know about Connor Stallion. He seems like such a wild card, doing all this on his own with no guidance. I wish I had more. I wish I had more doers like
Bama
him.
Maverick here in the roundtable mailbag. Is Jalen Milroe the Heisman front runner going into next year? We talked about that a little bit earlier. I can't see how he's not top 2 or 3.
Trying to think, is there a running? I can't think of a running back. Can't think of a wide receiver. Can't think of a tight end. The quarterback's a Quinn Ewers, obviously.
Yeah, assuming Drake May goes out, Caleb Williams is not playing in the bowl game for USC, so that tells you everything you need to know there.
Yeah, maybe if you're
Bo
looking at
Nix
like
is 46 years old, so he's
they're
disqualified.
the one to watch. I think the answer is yes. I think Jalen's a top 2 or 3 guy for sure. One I'm going to be curious to see is what happens with Tennessee's quarterback, the freshman, true
Nico,
freshman Nico, getting a chance to
yeah,
play.
yeah,
So
that's
there's
the
guys
thing.
like that can emerge. Carson Beck,
Yeah,
if he comes back? I didn't know Carson Beck was seriously thinking about going
he's a
pro.
2020 guy. I mean, same class as Bryce.
Yeah, I didn't realize that till I'm reading our Georgia site. Rusty Manziel, Jake Rowe had some good stuff. I didn't realize that was on the table. But if he comes back, maybe he's he's definitely a top 5 candidate. We're going to start with the quarterbacks, and Jalen and Quinn will probably be the 2 biggest names next year. I might be missing somebody, but Jalen's definitely going to be up there.
Irish Flush here in the mailbag. He already wants to know what's the point target Alabama needs to hit in the Rose Bowl to win the game against Michigan. Is there already in your mind, Tim, a sweet spot in terms of points? I thought it was 27-ish
I was
for
going to say
Georgia,
29 to 30.
and I hit it right on it. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be similar to that for this game with Michigan. I think if you get north of 24 especially, you should be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I mean, if your defensive, if Michigan's, if Michigan's in the 30s, you're probably in a little bit of trouble. And I think they would say the same 20, that 30, 31 plus range. So probably in the same boats there. But now, if you're looking at the 2 offense, the one most likely to score in the 30 and up, it's got to be Alabama, right?
Oh yeah, I think if it gets into
So I mean, now we could
it
get
gets
old
north of
fashioned.
30.
We could get old fashioned 17 to 16 game here too. So
Michigan scored 30 on Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State's at that level with Alabama
No, I
defensively.
don't think their defense was as good.
No.
They have a lot of talent on that defense, but Bama's team as a unit.
Question here on Grant Nelson, Alabama basketball. Oates said if we don't develop him into a lottery pick, we failed him. I think he's a good college player, but can't see Grant Nelson being a lottery pick. What about that, Tim?
I would be surprised if he's a lottery pick myself. I mean, how old's Grant Nelson now? 22, maybe?
I think he's somewhere. His mustache is only about 14, but yeah, he's
who brought that back? I mean, guys, you don't look like Tom Selleck and Burt Reynolds. Those are great stashes. Y'all aren't at that level, but with Grant, the thing, I always go back to this with basketball. I'll never forget this. When Chris Duhon was a sophomore at Duke, he was a top 5 pick. He was a for sure lottery pick. As a senior, he went the second round. Chris Duhon was no different than he was his sophomore year. So I think the older you are in the Major League Baseball drafts like that, when they go overseas and draft those guys, 16 is the prime age. That sounds really bad, but 16 is the age they like to draft them. And when they're at 18, their stock is lower as a baseball player. True story. I've watched documentary on it and everything else. So I think it hurts Grant. I'd be surprised if he's a lotto. I mean, he's still got to get bigger. He's still got to get stronger, but he's skilled. He's got that Euro vibe. I think it would help him better if he's coming from, Serbia. I think that they'd see him a little bit different. They'd see him more as a Euro guy, but he's got talent. Lottery's hard. I haven't looked deep, but they tend to go heavy, out of the country. They tend to go super heavy first year guys, and it was a pretty good recruiting class.
Yeah. He does have that kind of versatility, right? That you want as
no
a
doubt.
6'11" guy. But yeah, I mean, you start talking about lottery pick or that elite level and guys like Luca, and as easy as they make it look at their size. And now you got Wemby doing it at what? What's Wemby? 7'6", 7'5"?
7'4", I think. But
crossing people up, shooting
he's 8
step back
feet.
Jays. I mean,
8 feet in length. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Basketball height's tricky because, a guy 6'10" with no neck is taller than a guy that's 6'10" with a long neck. I know that sounds crazy. Arm length comes into play. You see those on Herb's got that. Herb's a great defender because he's got tremendous instincts and arms that go with it. But from a talent standpoint, when you watch the difference, like we go to NBA games every year, and if you watch them, we love to watch the warm-ups. The watch family loves the warm-ups because I can kind of see what kind of day a guy's having and what they do. But when you watch those jokers in the NFL warm up, and we were at the Alabama game earlier this year, and you watch a college team warm up, dude, it's different levels. I mean, it is different levels. You got everybody out there shooting jumpers in the NBA, but I do think Grant Nelson's an NBA player. With all that said, I just don't know about the lottery.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough nut to crack when you start talking about the lottery. One of my favorite folks on BamaOnline.com, Big Rip 24 asks, "Do you think Caleb Downs is an All-American this year? We know he's a freshman All-American, but an All-American." And then look, even in that SEC championship game, you had some really good safeties on the field, including Malachi Starks of Georgia, who for me is an All American. I believe he's a Thorpe Award finalist. So
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
he's one of them. I think you could make an argument for Caleb at that level. Again, I haven't seen every safety or every defensive back in the country this year, but we've seen previous Alabama All Americans at that spot, and Caleb's
Yeah.
already performing pretty much to that level.
I think he's as advanced as anybody Nick Saban's had, right? I mean, as far ahead as he is. And the thing about Caleb that stands out to me is the lack of times he got exposed. You know, it's not, you know, if he had a play where he was beaten, you were kind of surprised by it. That kind of tells a tale for a true freshman to me. I think he's an All-American. Again, I'm with you. I don't know if I haven't seen the whole country of All-Americans. He's definitely, not only is he the freshman All-American, on 3, the AP poll had him defensive freshman of the year. So the accolades, you know, we said it all last year. I especially love the fact that, to me, he was without a doubt the number one player in the country as far as just position be damned. He was as good at his position. He was better at his position than anybody else in his class in the country at their position.
Yeah, you were adamant about that. You were.
Yeah, he was the best. It's just, and it's not just on the field where he's as gifted as it comes, but it's also the work ethic, the blue collar, all the little stuff that goes with it, the lunch pail, the video, the watching film and everything that goes with it. You know, because you can be super talented and not super, super good. You got to do a little research.
Last one before we get out of here. Bama ZB, can y'all talk about the evolution of Reese's play calling throughout the season and after Saturday night? For instance, the last drive when they had to have at least one first down, you saw Bama put the game in the hands and legs of Milroe by running different sets, shifts, plays than we've seen during the year. How much do y'all expect Bama to put the game on Milroe's legs moving forward? It's been fascinating to watch where this offense has come over the course of the season. They hit that stretch there from about Texas A&M on, Tim, where it felt like every week we were getting something new or something to expand this offense, and not just in terms of play calling, but how personnel was incorporated, like Kendrick Law and some of those type of things. It's been impressive, and absolutely, I mean, this is what you play for. This is the mountaintop that you're just a few steps away from. So I don't know if there'll be an increase in design runs for Jalen Milroe in the playoff or against Michigan, but I think when they absolutely need it, like the end of the Georgia game, I don't think Tommy Rees going to have any problem dialing that kind of stuff.
How great was that play? I mean, that
Couple
was
of them.
blocked well, wide open. You got to partly be expecting that, right?
You do.
Again,
but that's where the extra blocker and the quarterback as a runner is devastatingly effective.
That was the fastest I saw him the whole day, too. I mean, he knew he had to get 10, 12 yards, and I mean, obviously got more, but he took off and he just, floored it. But yeah, I agree. I think with the legs, I think the key with the thing about a running quarterback is they don't have to run to impact the game. There's a spy, that whole spy. I mean, people have explained that, and I know defensive coaches that lose their mind when they say, of course, we're trying to spy him, but you don't want to give up an extra defender on the back end. You don't want to keep a guy from coming on the front end. I mean, you're losing a defender. You usually don't have to. Against, say, a Carson Beck, you don't have a defender spying Carson Beck. You just got, your man-to-man if he scrambles. But with a guy like Jalen Milroe, you're definitely going to have to factor that in. So it's a problem. But I thought Tommy Rees did a good job compared. If you go back and watch cut-ups from games one to the Georgia game, I think you're going to see an involvement. And I think there's probably other people involved as well, trying to figure out, how to get the most out of Jalen, get Jalen to want to run. Because you got to remember, Jalen Milroe has said through high school that he's not a running quarterback. He's a passing quarterback. It's not, I think he's not hesitant. He's hesitant to be labeled a running quarterback. I just think he's a quarterback that can run. I don't think he's necessarily a running quarterback. I think he throws the ball fine. I think he's going to throw the ball even better in the future.
Yeah, again, Reese, even the possession before the final possession when Alabama went down and got in the end zone to go back up 10, and look, Georgia was dictating pretty much at that point. They were bringing some extra guys on early downs, and there was that first down throw play call to Isaiah Bond where CJ Allen, the Georgia linebacker, came on the blitz and Milroe hit Bond right behind him. That kind of sparked that entire possession. So Tommy had some stuff in the bag late. He didn't put it all out there in the first quarter or two or three. He had plenty for the dogs down the stretch.
They experiment and then they adjust to what works and what doesn't work and what's comfortable, and that includes the blocking schemes and everything. But obviously the offensive line paved the way to extend a lot of what the offense could do in a big way.
Absolutely. There you go. That's the roundtable mailbag, and that's pretty much it for us, Tim.
Thank you for everyone who asked questions. We appreciate it as always.
We absolutely do, and we certainly encourage you to hang out with us right there at BamaOnline.com, the roundtable, our premium message board. But if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now, right there, right here, for our YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. Like our content. We'd appreciate that very much as well. For Tim Watts, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us right here on T. Watts and TR. And until next time, so long, everybody.